Hi everyone. In today's training, we are going to talk about the TBI Partner School Tiering System. So in this recording today, some of the learning objectives and things we will talk about are why we have a tiering system. So the tiering system is essentially the way that we choose to categorize our partner schools. And we're going to talk about what the incentive is behind having that system. We're going to talk about how we tier a school, and we're also going to talk about what information is needed in order for us to tier a school. The learning objectives for this course are you'll understand the significance of the tiering system and why we do it in order to apply the information, that information to conversations with schools. So we want you to be able to understand the tiering system and understand how the tiering system affects how you talk to partner schools. We want you to understand how the tiering system works. And we also want you to understand the policies we have about talking about the tiering system with partner schools as well. Okay, so let's take a deeper dive into the tiering system. The most important thing to understand about the TBI tiering system is that it's based on marketability in the Chinese market. So when we're looking at the tiering system, we're looking at all the different things that a Chinese parent would be looking for in order to pick the best school for their student. And the way that we have chosen to score it reflects what a parent would be looking for. China Team uses this as a guide to recommend schools to students. So for them, it's a really good tool to know how desirable a school will be. If it's a higher tier, we know that we can sell the school fairly easily, and they can be very selective about the kinds of students that they review. Whereas if it's a lower tier school, we know we have to market it a little bit more creatively and also have to be really flexible with those admissions requirements. Admissions uses it as a guide for helping schools understand what kind of requirements they can demand from a student. So a tier 1 school, they can require things like an SSAT score or a high TOEFL score or maybe an extra teacher recommendation. While a tier 5 school or a tier 4 school, they have to be extremely flexible because they don't have the marketability to really support recruitment. It's helpful to know what kind of school you're talking to and what tier they are before you start having conversations with each school, because it really changes with the caliber school how you speak to them. Schools from a tier 1 or tier 2, they generally have very high level students already. They're not as focused on ESL, but maybe they are focused about getting those students into competitive universities. Lower tier schools, they generally have to focus on things like ESL and international support. So they will ask a lot of questions about that. And it's really good to have that information before you start talking to the schools. And it also kind of helps us understand how much we can ask of a school. Tier 1 and Tier 2 schools, they attract a lot of students. They're very important to our program, especially when it comes to drawing in more students to our program. When it comes to our Tier 1 and 2 schools, they're able to demand a little bit more from us as a program because they are so important to keeping our program running. When it comes to the lower tier schools, they also play an important role in helping us enroll different kinds of students. You know, a lot of our students that end up in tier 4 and 5 schools are students that need a little bit more support. They need a little bit more help when it comes to adjusting to the U.S. Another important thing to know about the tiering system is it is internal information. We really want to avoid telling our schools about the tiering system because we don't want them to see this as us sort of scoring our schools in any way. We don't want them to think that we see some schools as better than others. So how does it work? We're going to take a closer look on how we have built out the tiering system. And it can be applied to any school in the United States. And it's scored out of 100 points. 45% is from academic rigor, 25% are for facilities, 15% is the student population, 10% is for the neighborhood, and then 5% are some additional selling points that help a school become a little bit more marketable. A score above 85 equals a tier 1, and then anything below 40 equals a tier 5. And the tiers kind of pace themselves in between 85 and 40. And then the score can also be adjusted by China Team. So ultimately, the tiering system is here to support China Team, help them really market schools and understand how to market each school. And if they feel like the school tier isn't a good fit, they can adjust it up or down one if needed. So here are the data points taking a closer look. Academic rigor. So when we score the academic rigor, we look at SAT and ACT scores, we look at the number of AP courses the school offers, and the percentage of graduates that enroll in college. And when we look at the percentage of graduates, we look at 2 in 4-year and also 4-year. For example, a lot of our Tier 1 schools will have 100% of graduates enroll in 4-year universities. And a school that's maybe a Tier 3 or 4 may have 95% graduates enrolled in 2 or 4-year universities. So we also give extra credit for schools that have a high number of dual enrollment courses or also a high number of faculty with advanced degrees. The next score are the facilities. So when we look at the facilities, we'll take a look at just the number of acres. So the more acres a school has, the more points they will get. We'll also do a facility score. So when the partnership team goes to visit the school for the first time, they'll come back and they'll give a score from 1 to 8, 8 being the best, on how nice the facilities are. And then tech programs. So if a school has a STEM lab or maybe a one-to-one computer program, or maybe they have a good amount of smart boards, all of that will add up to become the tech program score. The next section is the student population. So when we look at the student population, we look at the total number of enrollment. That's the first score that we give. Families from China generally like schools that have a high student population. So the bigger the school, the better. But we also look at the student-teacher ratio. So the smaller the student-teacher ratio, the better. And those scores are about the same. So the idea is that a high student enrollment with a small teacher ratio will get a high score, whereas a small student enrollment and a high student-teacher ratio would get a low score. We also look at the Chinese student population. So a lot of families, they want to make sure that their student isn't the only Chinese student, but they also don't want there to be a high population of Chinese students. And the way we score that reflects the lower amount of students, the better. And we also give penalty points in this section. So single-sex schools are a little bit more difficult to recruit for. So they get subtraction points if they're single-sex. And new international programs. So if there hasn't been an international student at the school before, or the school isn't used to working with international students, we'll take away a point or two to reflect that in the tiering. Next, we look at the neighborhood. So the first thing we check with the neighborhood is the average household income within the area surrounding the school. And we also will look at the neighborhood type. There are 4 neighborhood type options. The first is very nice neighborhoods. We have suburban, we have rural, and the last one is urban. The nice neighborhood score is the highest. Suburban and rural are actually the same, and then urban is actually the lowest score. And then the additional selling points. When we look at additional selling points, we look at things that would help a student or help a school, help put them over the edge. So the first thing that we look at are famous alumni, competitive university partnerships, and Ivy League or TBI matriculations. We look at the matriculations, we look at, for a school that's new, we'll take a look at the Ivy League matriculation and how many students they've sent to an Ivy League school. But an older school, we'll take a look at where our TBI students are going. If a high percentage of TBI students are going to top 50 universities, they'll get more points than if they're going to sort of lower level schools. The tiering data is collected every year and rescored by the admissions team, and we collect that data through the returning school questionnaire. And that sums up the tiering system. If you have any questions about how we tier schools or concerns about a school that has been tiered, please feel free to reach out to the partnership team. Thanks.